My KTM 390 Adventure R is valued at 17,512 New Zealand dollars. I almost can't believe it when I say it out loud. With a purchase price of 11,999, I've spent 46% of that over and above just on upgrades alone. Today I'm going to run through all of the parts I've put on the bike, what they've cost me, whether I think you should buy them, and at the end of the video I'll run through a bit of an example of what I think you should buy if you're on a budget. Welcome to Backroad Theory, let's get into it. Now, I will start by saying I'm based in New Zealand. All of these prices are in New Zealand dollars. In your country, you might find that some of these parts are, of course, maybe a different price. Now, I've tried to go back and get the exact cost of what I spent at the time. Some of these prices have actually gone up, so I've tried to find a bit of a balance of what this bike would cost you to build today. One of the first things I'm going to try and get you into in the dealership is the Quickshifter upgrade, and it's only a software unlock, but it is going to cost you around $450. I probably couldn't live without it now. I really do like the fact that quick shifts both up and down through the gearbox, but I have ridden the KTM 390 Enduro that didn't have the Quickshifter fitted, and it was still a fun bike to ride. So probably one of those things that you could maybe look at getting later on down the line, but also you've got to go into the dealership to get it done, so maybe while it's there, you could look at ticking that off the list. I did fit the KTM Power Parts frame covers here. They're really easy to fit. They take literally 2 minutes to put on. Now they're only about $55. Not one of those things you have to have, but if you want to protect the frame and stop the paint from wearing off from your boots and that sort of thing, they're nice to have. They're really easy to fit and really not an expensive upgrade. Another protection part I went for was the KTM Power Parts clutch and ignition cover. Now they're around $128 each, pretty easy to fit. They're just a plastic cover that goes on the outside of your engine cases. They're going to help protect it in the event of dropping the bike over on a rock or something like that. I did have to make my sump guard fit to get around them. We'll get to that later on, and I'll also mention why maybe I wouldn't go for those again if I had a second chance. Another protection upgrade I went for was the screen protector. Now it's really simple and cheap. It's only around $33. I can almost guarantee you've probably got a screen protector on your phone. It's very similar to that. You pull the backing off and stick it on. I'm actually on my second one now, thankfully, because the first one I scratched really bad. Had I not had that on there, that definitely would have scratched my screen. It's one of those things that's nice to put on maybe when you buy the bike on day one, because inevitably you are going to scratch it, and for $33, pretty cheap and easy solution. Now let's talk about mirrors. Now a lot of you guys have asked me where I've got these mirrors from, and they're actually just from Temu. They were $40, super cheap, but they've done a really good job through the times where I've dropped the bike. The mirrors have always come out the other end in one piece. They are a bit of a replica of the double take mirror. I didn't think they were going to last very long, so I sort of bought them on a whim thinking that they might be disposable, but they've actually done a really good job. And as we know, most mirrors that come out on motorbikes from the factory, they're horrific, big steel things, and they always undo and come loose. So these are a good option for adventure riding. You can fold them out the way if you need to, and so far so good. For $40, probably one of my best purchases. Now I get a lot of questions about the graphics kit on this bike, and it comes from SKDA in Australia. Now their website has plenty of different options for the KTM 390 Adventure R, so if you want to make your bike stand out and look unique, I would certainly suggest you start there. However, it is going to cost you around $580, so it's not a cheap exercise. However, I put it on to sort of look after the plastics and protect the original graphics on the bike, so one day I'll peel it off and hopefully underneath it looks nice and fresh. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I'm running the Dunlop D606 tyres. Now I put them on from the day that I took the bike out of the dealership, so I can't even really tell you what the original tyres are like. However, I find these a great price point, $138 for the front, maybe $144 for the rear, almost cheaper than a mountain bike tyre these days. I find them really good off-road in the type of conditions that I ride a lot. You've got to be a little bit careful on road. They are quite an aggressive tyre when they're brand new. However, again, I've taken the original tyres, put them in the roof of the garage. When I go to sell this bike one day, they'll go straight back on, and it's a little bit easier to digest at that point rather than having to replace the tyres when you sell the bike. Now looking back through my list of expenses, I had my first service at 1000k as per the manual, and that cost me around $260 at the dealership. For that I got an oil change, and they looked over the software and made sure it was all up to date and that sort of thing. However, there is a big jump from there to your next service. I think it's around 10,000k when they're due in the dealership again for an oil change, or you could do it yourself. So that initial 1000k's can come around pretty quickly, but it's best to get it back in the dealership, get them to do their thing at 1000, and then you're back out on the road for another 9000k. One little part I had to replace, and we'll put it down to repairs and maintenance, was the kickstand spring. It's only around $12, so while I was at it, I grabbed another one to put in my tool bag. Now that happened when I was on the west coast. I went through a river crossing and the spring broke somehow right in the middle of the water. So it was a bit of a mission to get out. The bike obviously won't run when the stand falls down, so I had to spend the rest of the weekend with my stand cable tied up. So for the sake of having another one now in my tool bag for $12, hopefully that's a little bit of an insurance policy for the next time I break one. Now, one product and brand I've spent a little bit of money on the KTM 390 is the B&B Offroad product, and that's the things like the tail rack, my side plates, my sump guard, radiator guard, horn cover, kickstand foot. I think the only thing I haven't got is the front sprocket cover. Now, they are a fantastic company, beautiful quality product, no affiliation there, but I know good manufacturing when I see it. Their communication is top notch. Delivery, packaging, everything end to end with that business is superb. I have got the side plates. These now are a little bit redundant due to my rackless system that I'm using from Westwind, but at the very least I would suggest you look at getting the tail rack. Now the tail rack is going to cost around $422. That was for the black powder coated version. You can get all this stuff now in sort of a raw aluminium finish. It's a little bit cheaper, it still looks really nice. I went for the full black catalogue on my bike. But then to complement the tail rack, you can get the side plates. They're going to be $240 for the powder coated version as well. The little horn cover is going to cost you $98, and as we discussed way back at the 1000K review, that horn's quite exposed, so they've done a really good job at relocating it and protecting it. From there, you might want to look at the radiator cover, $345 for the aluminium black powder coated radiator cover. Now, I went for that purely because I thought the original one kept the radiator a little bit vulnerable, and I wasn't that confident in going through some of the terrain that I'm in with the standard one. I forgot, I did also go for the tail tidy, so that's another B&B Offroad product I got. $217 to tidy up your indicators and your number plate. There's a wee 3D printed bracket in there to relocate the indicators. It's really cool. It does take a little bit of time to fit, so have some patience with that. It's probably the most time consuming part to fit on the bike. You do have to do a little bit of wiring as well, so if you're not confident in that, maybe you need to tackle it with a bit of help. But again, the whole rear end on this bike is sort of B&B Offroad catalogued, and I think it looks really cool. It's finished the bike off beautifully. Black powder coat makes it look pretty sleek. It's quite funny when I actually see a bike that I'm interested in looking at for my next bike, the first thing I do is go on B&B Offroad's website and see what their sump guards and skid plates look like for it. Now the B&B Offroad sump guard is going to sting you around $500 for the black powder coated version. Now it's not a cheap exercise, however it's probably one of the best sump guards on the market, far better than the one that comes from factory. So if we put that in the protection category, it's money well spent. It's going to protect the bottom of your engine in the event of bottoming out on a rock or something like that. They've done all the hard work in figuring out the best way to mount the sump guard. It's a really fantastic solution. It comes with top quality hardware, but going back to my side cases that I bought at the very start, I probably wouldn't go for those again because the sump guard does a really good job of protecting the cases on the bike. However, I did have to modify it to fit around the right hand side cover here. So just one of those things to be aware of. It's kind of chicken and egg. If you're looking at getting the engine cases, probably invest that money into the sump guard and you may not need to have to worry about it. Hey, just quickly, if you're looking for a new luggage system for your adventure bike, head over to westwindmoto.com. That's where you'll find the gear that I'm using, like the Ranger Wilds Rackless 24 setup, my big duffel bag here, and even my little hydration pack. I'll leave a link in the description down below, and if you use code BACKROAD26 at the checkout, it won't cost you anything extra, it helps out the channel. In fact, you'll save 5% on your order. I won't hold you up any longer, let's get back to the video. Now down here in the dirt, we've got the B&B Offroad Sidestand foot. It's $95, not one of those things you have to have, but if you're riding regularly in soft ground, inevitably your bike may fall over because the footprint on the original stand is pretty small. This is going to make that footprint a little bit larger. I've found it really valuable for the type of riding that I'm doing, and again, as we know, B&B Offroad, quality product. Now one upgrade I've done here up the front is a new set of handlebars, and I've gone for a Renthal fat bar with an SX KTM bend, so it's a little bit straighter, less back sweep. It does cause a few problems. You have less lock here on the tower, and there's a few little fitting gremlins that you have to work through. Around $200, but for me it's moved me further forward on the bike with the type of riding style that I like to have. And it's also opened up my wrists a little bit more. They were kind of pinched off to the sides here with the back sweep that I had on the original bar. Now my hands are a little bit straighter. So for me, it's more of an ergonomic thing. But if you bend your original handbar, I'd strongly recommend going to something like a Renthal because it's probably going to have a little bit more longevity to it. Now while we're up here on the front of the bike, the other upgrade I went for was obviously the cruise control module and software unlock. I've done a separate video over on that, giving it a bit of a review and running through how it works. Now it isn't a cheap exercise, $380 for the switch block itself, and then I think it was around another 160 or so to unlock the software, maybe even more than that now. One of those things where for me it was a necessity. If I talk about my bad wrist, it allows me at the end of the day just to kind of release my grip on the right hand side of the bar with the cruise control switched on. I do really like it, but it's an expensive upgrade and probably not something I'd recommend early on in your build project. It might be something you get to later on as a bit of a luxury, but for me I found it fantastic, and again I'd probably struggle to go to another bike without cruise control. Now the only performance upgrade I've done is the GD Designs Airbox cover, which I bought from Chris Birch's website, Say No to Slow. That's in behind the shroud here, 105 New Zealand dollars or so. Now that's going to open the bike up in the lower to mid range. I've got a separate video over on the channel, so jump over and give it a view. But look, that's a pretty cheap and easy exercise, not something you have to jump into straight away, but if you wanted to sort of give the bike a bit more of an induction sound and change the power curve a little bit, then it might be something you look at later on down the line. My most recent protection upgrade was the headlight cover, and it's only 91 New Zealand dollars, but for me I got it a little bit too late. My headlight was already broken. Oh jeez, oh the stone's coming straight off Mark's back tyre. So it might be one of those things I suggest you get to sooner rather than later. Pretty easy to fit, it's only going to take you 5 or 10 minutes. KTM power parts though, so go through your dealer. They may take a little while to come in. I think I had to wait a little bit for mine to arrive. But again, probably one of those things you get to early on. KTM certainly skimped on the budget when it came to the handguards on the 390s. They're fully plastic and they won't last very well in the event of a crash. I'm on my second set of aftermarket handguards now. I started with the Achibi's X Factory, I think they were $220, but I dropped the bike a couple of times and I wasn't really that impressed with how the handguard performed. I actually had to replace it because in the most recent crash on the trail ride video, it was actually bent and broken beyond repair. So I've now gone to the Barkbusters handguard kit for the KTM 390. Fantastic bit of product. It is a little bit more expensive at around $330, but I'd highly recommend that you go straight to this handguard and don't try anything else. It's very strong and sturdy, great hardware. One thing I would look out for though is if you've gone to an aftermarket handlebar like me, you won't have the threaded insert that the factory handlebar has for the handguards to screw into. So you have to buy another little kit from Barkbusters. It's very cheap, and that is then your insert into the handlebar for these handguards to fit to. So $330, but they're going to protect your clutch and brake lever in the event of a crash, I think, with more confidence than the Achibi's version that I started with. So there we have it. That's the full rundown of parts that I've got on my KTM 390 Adventure R, over $5,500. Now I know what you're thinking. Why did you spend that much money on a KTM 390? Well, in New Zealand, I'm on my restricted license for a little bit longer anyway, and that means I have to choose from a certain category of bike, and to go adventure riding, the KTM 390 was the best fit for me. It was always going to need some upgrades to get to the point where I was comfortable with it and confident in the type of riding that I do. And I would argue that some of these parts that I've put on, I'm going to have to put on any bike. Hey, I could go buy a KTM 890 and still need maybe some better handguards or a luggage rack or a screen protector, that type of thing. So there's always going to be things we need to upgrade our bike with. Yeah, maybe $5,500 is a little bit on the upper end. One thing I haven't bought yet and I'm not sure about is the WP suspension upgrade. Now in New Zealand, that's going to cost me around $3,000 to $3,500 New Zealand dollars. Now that's at that point where I'll struggle to digest that the bike is worth over $20,000 for a KTM 390. So I would agree with you at that point that maybe I should move on and buy a bike with better suspension with that kind of money in my pocket. So look, hopefully this has helped you guide your decision-making process on parts you're going to put on your KTM 390. And I promised you a bit of a budget breakdown of what I think you should buy with your money. So let's run through that now. So you've got a budget of say $550. Let's look at what we could do with that. I'd go down the path of protecting the bike a little bit more. So maybe go for the headlight protector early on. That's going to stop it from stone chips and that kind of thing. Definitely get the screen protector. It's super cheap. You've got one on your phone. Makes sense to have one on your motorbike. Maybe look at some aftermarket mirrors. Easy to move around. They're not going to come loose like the original ones. Definitely go for the Barkbusters handguards. I couldn't recommend them enough as one of the early purchases for you to do. And then maybe look at the frame guards down here. Pretty cheap. They're going to keep that paint nice and good underneath. So for $550, that's your stage 1 build done. Now the next category is going to cost you a little bit more money, and it's around $1,200, and that's going to be the B&B Offroad sump guard, the horn guard and the radiator cover, and then maybe some new tyres. So that's going to get you out and about, maybe in a little bit more extreme scenarios than what you did with the original tyres, but with a bit of confidence that you've now got some extra protection to take care of it. So $1,200 for the stage 2 plus stage 1, so that's $550. So now we're into that $1,700-$1,800 mark. So it's starting to add up, but at this point you've got a bike that's well protected and a little bit more capable off-road. Now stage 3 is going to be $775 more or less, and that's going to get you the B&B Offroad tail tidy, the Quickshifter, and the GD Designs Airbox cover. So now we're starting to add a little bit more performance, aesthetically tidying up the back end of the bike a little bit, but now all in, we're in for $2,500, and I think at that point you've got a bike that's well and truly capable, enjoyable to ride both on and off-road, and everything outside of that, let's call it a luxury. Graphics kits, cruise control, look, they're nice to have, certainly not a necessity. So at that point you're $11,999 for your bike, $2,500 for upgrades, you've got great tyres, great protection, and a bike that's well and truly capable. But hey, look, straight out of the showroom, these bikes will do everything you probably ask of them. You just want to think about protecting them and maybe upgrading some of those things that KTM have skimped on their budget. That's going to bring me to the end of the video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It might have given you a bit of an insight in what it costs to build a bike up to this kind of spec here. I've got lots of other videos over on the channel that run through some of these different products in more detail. Please be sure to check them out. If this is the type of content that you're interested in, also give me a like and subscribe down below. Thanks for watching Backroad Theory. I hope to see you again.